And we are back. Another exciting edition of the Moby Dick Book Club, chapters 10 through 15. Just a reminder to anybody who's listening that you can join in the conversation by joining our little Discord server. The link is down in the description. It'll give you access to these meetings and the upcoming readings. A little bit shorter this week, huh, Mark?
Apparently, yeah. I don't know where everybody is.
Yeah. Well, the reading's a little shorter this week.
That too. I guess.
So
I don't know.
I guess if
It
everybody's
didn't
going to
seem
bail.
shorter.
Okay, well, if I had put in the next chapter in there, it would have gotten us to be very, very long. Chapter 16 is a very long chapter. So,
Oh, apparently, yeah. Now I'm looking at it. Like, holy cat. Okay.
Yeah,
16
yeah.
is almost as long as half of what we had.
yeah. So it's we're just going to let that be for a bit. It's some more interesting reading. We get a lot of Ishmael and Queequeg here in these chapters.
We do.
There was some funny lines in here. Let me see if I could just pull up the other screen. And we'll make it a little bigger so the kids at home can follow along. And it was all right. I loved this line right here. I'm pretty sure it's from chapter 15. But perhaps to be true philosophers, we mortals should not be conscious of so living or so striving. So soon as I hear that such and such a man gives himself out for a philosopher, I conclude that, like the deceptical women, that he must have broken his digester. And as far as I can tell, right, just trying to grapple with Melville's crazy English here, that just means that he thinks people who style themselves as philosophers are full of crap.
Yes.
The digester's broken. I just thought that was a funny line. But that's right here from chapter 10, where Queequeg and Ishmael become friends. So, did you say anything in particular?
I mean, we're still in set and setting, right? And then there's an interesting move in this whole sequence, right? Like everything's in motion, but we're still in set and setting. It's just a weird literary move at some point, right? It's a weird way to write something, probably a better way, but weird to we'll say recent audiences. I mean, there's a lot going on in the just in this section because of that. Like I said, we're still in this mode where we're moving everything around, progressing the characters. We're still in character development mode, and there's so much here because he's really focused on the idea of the pagan. But he also links Queequeg to George Washington, which I was just like, well,
if you think so, in this chapter, we get a little bit of Queequeg's backstory. And Queequeg is a descendant of nobility on his little island. And so he is very, talks about how he's got his dad is the king and his uncle's the high priest, and his mother's aunts were all married to like warriors and such. And so I think you can make that connection there. It's like, hey, this is like the best of what his civilization has to offer in terms of his formation and his patronage, I suppose, or patronage, patrimony, pedigree. There's the word I'm looking for. Pedigree. Yeah.
But you'll notice in 10 he makes the connection to George Washington, but the biographical is chapter 12, where we actually find out his story. So it's more foreshadowing.
Okay.
Right. There's all this foreshadowing right? Like
Okay.
George Washington cannibalistically developed. Is the,
Oh goodness.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny, and so he's setting you up to tell the biographical, right? That's chapter 12, and that's what's so interesting to me, right? Is that he does have these configurations and setups for this, but yeah, I mean, he's still Ishmael is still looking over him and sort of getting to know him
Mm-hmm.
and contrasting the savage or the pagan or whatever with civilized society or Christendom or whatever, however you want to frame it in 10. And so I mean 10's really short, right? Like it's just not that long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's also where they really feel the friendship with hey Castle.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, they seal the friendship with a material exchange, but also with a non-material exchange, a pledge.
Right. There's that, and then there wasn't it in this chapter where they Ishmael joined in the worship of Queequeg's little idol?
Yeah.
See, I think that's the more. I mean, they had the material exchange, sure, but they.
Well, that's what I mean. That's the non-material portion of it.
Yeah, and that was the way he managed to justify idolatry on Christian principles.
The justification was fascinating. I wanted to know what you thought of that.
Oh, I mean, it 100% doesn't work. The very first commandment of the Bible is against idolatry. Like, not okay, but
it was funny the way he twisted it all, and also I think he's making fun of the Presbyterian.
Oh yeah, no. When he was talking about the infallible Presbyterian Church, I was like, I think infallibility is actually against Presbyterian doctrine.
Yeah.
I don't think he really understood church when his mom made him go when he was a kid, or his stepmother, I suppose.
Well, I think
that might have been a part of it.
Yeah, I think there's a making fun of here for sure.
Yeah,
I think in some ways, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I bet what we're going to come to here is you can choose A or you can choose B, but B is better. And Ishmael is choosing A in the beginning.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'm still a no on idolatry, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me on that Ishmael would not have that same kind of reaction to it, So
I thought it was kind of interesting how it was like immediately after the marriage part. Like I didn't expect them to go that far to even explicitly kind of say that, but I did think it was interesting that there's a lot of these like kind of Old Testament themes, and then like throughout the Old Testament, because I have had a recent read through, like every time somebody marries someone that's foreign, they inevitably wind up going like directly to idolatry, like just right away. And
except for Moses. Moses was the one who was actually able to, his wife turned out all right. She was a Cushite, but she turned out all right.
Yeah, but most people can't pull it off.
Most people can't pull that off. No. So yeah, that's actually a really good connection, because that's exactly how it works in the Old Testament. Is you marry a foreign wife, they start introducing you to all their idols. It's bad news. Don't do it.
That was like the King Solomon thing. Like exactly that he. I think like King Solomon had like 700 wives and 300 girlfriends or something, and they were all foreign. And then he goes in his in the Book of Wisdom and like says, hey, yeah, that was a mistake. Like that was pretty much. And then it's just like they go in kind of like the third person perspective. They're like, yeah, and then he went and he committed idolatry, and it's like, yep. But I was amazed just how many like things there were kind of going back and forth with this like marriage with Queequeg thing. That it was just like over and over again. Like Herman is just kind of like just hammering it home that that you have this whole thing where I think in previous episodes you guys had talked about like kind of the mixing of like the inside and the outside, just kind of like constantly sort of changing that over. And I was like, oh gosh, even the first night that they slept in the same bed, like he wakes up and he describes the tomahawk pipe, which itself is like it's an outside weapon and also like a recreational thing. And then like they smoke indoors, which is already kind of like out there.
Well, that was pretty normal back in those days.
Yeah, but just kind of this thing of like, you have the weapon, which, later on, like in one of these chapters, like they're not allowed to bring a weapon into a location, but they have like kind of the outside stuff is inside. And then he even wakes up to it scratching him a little bit, and he describes it as an axe-headed baby. And I was like, oh, that's kind of, there's just like, it's this constant marital thing. And strangely, he keeps casting himself as the female, just like, and he keeps on kind of doing this over and over again. But yeah, that was just kind of one. I guess that too. It kind of makes sense that it's like he's kind of receiving the breath or the inhalant, I guess, from Queequeg, the tobacco, everything. But I was like, it's a strange sort of. I don't know. I made some connections with the language of creation there a little bit, but I was like, it's a very odd chapter for sure.
Yeah, I did want to get sort of your take on all the marriage talk, Father, because to me that's like you're taking. So he's being explicit, right, about the development of a friendship, a deep friendship. Bosom friendship is not, friend I met on the street sort of thing. It's more like, oh no, this is a close friend. Bosom, right? That's what bosom friendship is, a close friend. And then that's a flattening, right? You're flattening marriage into friendship, right? Or I mean, you could look at it up as lifting up, but I don't think that's possible.
I wasn't picking that up there. I think he's so we're out on a limb here. I'll go out on a limb. I think he's using the marital imagery, not to actually talk about marriage, but to talk about kind of what happens to. I'm going to draw a little ahead here. I've already mentioned that Queequeg is a descendant of kings here. And it seems like Ishmael is a descendant of nobody, right? He's not really, he doesn't have much of his own firm identity, right? And that's Ishmael in the Bible. He was driven off from his father's house. He only makes it because he's got the favor of the Lord upon him. Now, what happens in a marriage is that with the establishment of a new family union, at least in traditional places, the woman becomes a part of the man's family and takes on the man's name. That's how it functions. And so I think what happens is that because Ishmael goes out to the fringe of society and encounters something noble but savage, he gets drawn into that on account of not having a strong identity in himself.
Sure.
And so I think that's the more useful way to use the marriage imagery that Melville is using here, rather than that telling us anything about marriage. Because, he says we are friends, but he says the embrace, the sort of thing that was like a marital embrace. So,
well, sure. Like the last line of 10, right? Thus then in our heart's honeymoon lay I and Queequeg, a cozy, loving pair. What? I mean, the whole chapter is strange beyond belief. And also, touching in a way, but there is that mixing, to Castle's excellent point. There's a mixing there. And it's like, what is going on? And I do think it's part of like the flattening, right? Because you can't lift something up. Sorry. It's gravity. Right. And so anytime you try, you just drag the higher thing down.
I found it really interesting too, kind of the contrast between, like there's essentially all these ocean elements inside the church in the previous chapters, and then you have the little idol that the Queequeg has is like in the hearth inside the house, so it's like kind of the inside. It's more of the mixing, but it's kind of like the very outside idol thing is literally right there inside the bedroom, right next to the fire, and then the church is more or less, in a sense, like out in the ocean.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's certainly the way Ishmael relates to it. When you read about him going to the church, you didn't get the sense he was doing it out of a particularly strong sense of piety. It was more like, well, yeah, obviously you have to go to this chapel. So.
Yeah, I guess we're at 11 then, because 10 is just strange.
Yep. Oh, okay. So now that we're on to chapter 11, I want to say that the whole bit about sleeping underneath a warm blanket in a cold room is 100% true. And as a true northerner, I keep my thermostat at 65 degrees in the winter, and I sleep quite soundly as a happy man.
Nice.
Oh, it's so nice. It's so nice. And now I'm here in Washington, D.C., and no central air conditioning, so we just make it through the summer. Oh, but that contrast thing, Mark, you've been going on about that for a while.
Yeah, that was all about contrast, and they use that term in here, in fact, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, is that you can't appreciate the warmth but for the coldness of part of you, right? Is it your feet? Is it your head? It wouldn't matter, right? And yeah, a lot of hay is made over the affordance, to use a John Vervaeke word, of contrast, right? The affordance of having some part of you cold makes the rest of you all the warmer, and the warmth in this case is associated with comfort directly. Right.
It's interesting that for him it has to be simultaneous. Like it can't be like, oh, I came into a warm building from the outside, which was cold. It's like you have to be both at the same time.
Yes.
In order for him to actually feel anything.
Well, he did that earlier, right? Like that's done earlier in the book. That's why. Right. So one way to look at this is, a lot of people make a lot of hay over Plato's Republic and the onion-like nature of the book, right? Which is all correct. Like they're not wrong. Like that's there. It's here too. That's it's right here. Like you think Plato's a good author? I agree. Also, like let me introduce you to Moby Dick, sir, because it's that same thing, right? Where the I think the mixing is probably for contrast. We'll find out more later, right? But the bringing in of set and setting into smaller and smaller pieces, right? Like he hunts down the inn, right? Deliberately, right? Then he gets into the inn, and there's a transition period, right? Now he's in the inn. All of the things that he mirrored on his journey to find an inn are now mirrored at the lower self-similar fractal layer, right? And so to get right back to the to the Language Creation Book Club, which didn't get, which I wasn't around, and Manuel was busy, so we didn't get that online. But apparently they did it without us. Good for them. But it's the same sort of thing, right? We're seeing these symbols, right, and the contrast is always of the banal with the Bible, right? And I suspect, not sure, that what's going to end up happening is the issue of sailors at sea, all men. It's going to somehow pop up somewhere in this text, because that's what's being highlighted, in the whole marriage thing, and in 11 with the closeness, right?
Another thing that I noticed was, right after all of the bit about the blanket, he starts talking about, he's got this bit where he's talking about how having your eyes closed makes you feel, no man can ever keep his own identity aright unless his eyes be closed, as if the darkness were indeed the proper part of our essences, the light be more congenial to our clayey part. And what I don't know, what I thought when he was talking about that is like, well, when you close your eyes, you no longer have, all of this senses coming into you. It highlights the contrast between looking outwards and looking inwards.
Right.
And
it stops the mixing in some sense. Right?
Yeah. You don't have anything coming into you, and then the only thing that you have left when you do that is whatever is inside of you, all by their own, all by its own. So,
right. And then, of course, they the other strange thing is they wake up in the middle of the night and then do this ritual together, the smoking ritual, and then go back to bed. And part of that too, and he says this explicitly, is all about the night before, him going, smoking in bed, how dangerous, you could burn the place down. Savage.
Yeah, but because they've become, best friends, the bestest possible friends, it's all just, it's fine. Go ahead and do that. My ways are now your ways. It's like Ishmael's basically just a blank tablet somebody can write on.
Exactly. Yeah, blank slateism. Yeah, right here.
And even his concern for what did he said something like the insurance policy of the innkeeper or something like that, which just kind of like he no longer had any regard for it at that point. I'm not sure if the siren took me over.
No, you're fine.
But he says something to your point about the let me see here. Yeah, I no more felt unduly concerned for the landlord's policy of insurance. It's just like, like he's willing to completely sacrifice the environment even that he's sleeping in, or at least compromise its security.
Well, and it's especially its insurance, because insurance is definitely a symptom of civilization.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Insurance is really something only civilized, and I just mean in terms of living in a city. That civilized people do. It's not something that happens out on the fringe, out on the coast.
Queequeg has no insurance on his
Queequeg doesn't have any insurance. So yeah. Sharing a pipe and a blanket with a real friend. Okay, so now that I've got my chronology right, do we want to move on to chapter 12?
Yeah, 12 is fascinating. That's where it's interesting too, right? Because he says at the end of 11, though at the time I but ill comprehended not a few of his words, yet subsequent disclosures, when I had become more familiar with his broken phraseology, now enable me to present the whole story such as it may prove in the mere skeleton I give. And there's a bunch of interesting things, at least to me, going on here. One is the author is self-critiquing. The other is that the author is telling you that the story that he's telling you is not in the order that he experienced it. Even right, because it's a partial story that he gets, but it's a full story that he tells.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we're being I'm sure if Jesse's watching this, he's thrilled. We're being actively manipulated in some sense. Right? But I mean, he's very upfront about it. It's not a bad thing. It's how we all do it, right? We all cast these things like, oh, at the time people knew this, even though they didn't, right? So yeah, that was what was really interesting to me. And then he launches into, what near as I can tell is just a complete telling of his biography, with a few little inserts from him about questions that seem contemporaneous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So we've got Queequeg. He is as as he's like the best that this Rocovoco has to offer. And it's not down on any maps. True places never are. Of course,
That's
if it's
that was the best comment in the book,
yeah.
right? It's not written down on any map. True places never are.
Because if it's a true place, right? Like, how could you capture it on a map?
Exactly.
Yeah. But he has this absolute drive for adventure. He against his against the objections of the captain. He managed to stow away on the boat and go and live among the Christians.
Right, because he thought they had something to offer that he could bring his people. That's what's so interesting. Right? He's like, oh, these seem like good, upstanding folks with lots of cool stuff, man. Maybe I should check out their world and like bring back all this wondrous stuff that they have.
And he, he's living among the sailors. But alas, the practices of whalemen soon convinced him that even Christians could be both miserable and wicked, infinitely more so than all his father's heathens. Arrived at last at Old Sag Harbor and seeing what the sailors did there, and then going to Nantucket and seeing how they spent their wages in that place also, poor Queequeg gave it up for lost. Thought he, it's a wicked world and all meridians, all die a pagan.
Yeah. Which I find fascinating, right? Because this sort of points to the simple, island life, isolated, on average, we don't have all this cool stuff, ships and harpoons and, whatever else, right? Or other things. But in some ways that's more wholesome than the extremes. Because that's really what it is, right? When the sailors are in one extreme, they're fine, right? When they get in the civilization extreme, because living on a boat, I don't know if you've gone on a boat overnight. I have. I like it. It's camping, but on the water and way harder and way less fun because you're confined to the boat, right? It's not in camping. You're not confined to your campsite.
You can go for a walk.
Yeah, it's frequently why you're there, right? It's go for walks and right, have campfires. You can't have a campfire on a boat, generally speaking. Wouldn't be a good plan. It's not a great plan. So there is that whole high contrast environment causing or at least seeming to correlate with, we'll say, the excesses of what otherwise look like, neat toys.
Yeah. And then there's this bit where he feels he was fearful that Christianity, or rather Christians, nice distinction there, had unfitted him to ascending the pure and undefiled throne of 30 pagan kings before him. By and by, he said he would return as soon as he felt himself baptized again. They made a harpooner of him, and that barbed iron was in lieu of a scepter now. So he's gone out, and he doesn't feel like he's quite ready to go back yet.
Right. Yeah, something has to happen to him.
It's just an interesting thing. I don't know. I don't quite know what to make of that, but it feels important. Like somehow having lost contact with the center of his world, he's got to get back to it by not going back to it. It's just, there's something there. I just can't put my finger on it.
He has to get back there somehow through some miracle, effectively. Right. I think I don't know much about this crazy Catholic stuff. Isn't baptism some minor form of miracle?
You could look at it like that. You could certainly, I guess all of the sacraments would be, insofar as through the actions of weak and stupid men like me, God's power is infallibly manifested. So I guess that's a miracle. We can call that a miracle. Yeah, I'm a piece. It's a miracle, Mark. Why didn't anybody tell you that?
I just kind of looked at it and said, oh, it sounds like a miracle to me. Right?
Yeah. As soon as he felt himself baptized again.
There might be a little bit of an element of that thing of like a prophet has no esteem or welcome like in his own home or something. That's like he went out and then had contact with Christianity, and then now he's just kind of like, at least himself feels like he's not able to go back to where he originally was.
I guess it's not Christianity specifically. It's the wicked ways of the wicked Christians he was meeting.
I've been seeing a lot of stuff of this kind of like, especially Ishmael's value of like the authentic outsider versus like the inauthentic. Like I think he has a phrase that he makes of civilized hypocrisies is one of the things that he talks about, and that I think that's something that kind of Queequeg was finding as well, that he might have been more amenable to like the Christian ideas had people actually been authentic about them.
And that's a classic danger of Christendom is, well, yeah, everybody's a Christian, so what?
Nothing to do here.
Yeah, it's like, that's about as interesting as saying, everybody in Green Bay is a Packers fan, right? It's just, yeah, of course.
Gives you nothing to do.
Yeah.
But that sentence right after the baptized again, right? For the nonce, however, he proposed to sail about and sow his wild oats in all 4 oceans. Right? And then he says the thing about the harpoon being in lieu of the scepter, which I find fascinating. But it's almost as if, here what Melville's effectively doing is he's saying, all right, look, we're going to cast the pagan ways in the Christendom frame and match them up one for one, again, contrast, right? Or mixing. Both are happening here in different ways. And I think that's really important. And it just seems to be that pattern over and over again in the text so far, which is kind of fascinating. That he's doing this this sort of binary contrasting thing over and over again, and in the process flattening a bunch of stuff that you can tell shouldn't be, right? Like it's clear, because again, we have an unreliable narrator, right? It's clear that what he's doing is kind of, I don't know, dude. You sure? You sure, bro?
I didn't catch that, Mark. Could you try to explain that again? I didn't follow.
I can give it a shot. So Castle was talking about the mixing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what he's effectively doing here with the story is he's framing the pagan story in the Christendom frame. Right. By drawing these parallels. Right.
Baptism, scepter. Okay. Yep.
Right. And that's a flattening, right? But it's by way of contrast, right? Look at his world, look at our world. They're not so different, but there is a difference, right? Because he's using those words very deliberately to your earlier point, right? It says, it's not Christianity, it's Christians. Right. So he's bifurcating the ideal Christianity, such as it is, from the people practicing. It might be practicing it, mm-hmm. Right? And that's more of the same, right? That's going on again at all these self-similar fractal layers in the onion-like book. So that was more my point, was
okay,
that parallel is being drawn on purpose. But again, he's an unreliable narrator too, so like
we'll see.
I think I was looking at the comment here. It looks like Pseudo Boethius has an interesting point about something that comes to his mind is the church's success in converting pagans throughout the ages. And one of the things that kind of called to mind for me, and it seems like it's something that Ishmael is attempting but doing poorly here, is I was thinking of like St. Patrick, that he goes to Ireland and people are like worshiping wells and high places. So what he does is all of his sermons he does at wells and on hills, and then he only does really sermons on hills and wells when he's at the hills and wells, and that wins over the Irish people, like kind of the indigenous Irish people before the people to the east of them had kind of shown up and everything. It seems like that might be something that Ishmael was trying to do by engaging in the idolatry, so that he can, give a little and then maybe get a little, even though I would say, went way too far on that.
Yeah, and he's not a man of a stable enough identity to be able to do that.
Yeah.
He's I mean, anything can come into Ishmael and take him over, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he said that explicitly earlier on. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's better Ishmael than me. That's what I'll say. He can do all this experimenting, and I can just watch the results. So yeah, and then they're also doing this little conversation about Queequeg's history in the dead of night while smoking, and then they go right back to sleep. So all of this stuff that happens in the middle of the night. Who can say? Who can say what that means? Alrighty. Chapter 13, the wheelbarrow.
Yeah, there's a again, a lot going on here.
It's I just like how right away he gets rid of the embalmed head.
Yes.
I don't know. He's not full pagan yet. He can't quite appreciate a good embalmed head, Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, and this is where we introduce the boat, right? This is the transition out of the inn onto the first boat to get to the island that is the gateway to the whales.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
it was just a really great line here. Was talking about Turnpike Earth. Let me see if I can pull that up. Two tabs here. Go turn. Yeah, so this is, we're a little ways in there. We haven't talked about the wheelbarrow yet, but Turnpike Earth. And Turnpike is, of course, a toll road. And again, a toll road is definitely a very strong side of civilization. Hey, we built this road and you have to pay to use it. And turned me to admire the magnanimity of the sea, which will permit no records. So it just gives us his insight into the earth and the sea here about the way he sees these things. He looks towards the earth. He sees slavery. He sees drudgery. It makes him sick. It makes him depressed. When he goes out to sea, that settles him, even though everything around him is unsettled.
Right.
And I just love the fact that Melville is good enough to just use a regular old noun as an adjective, which has just got to be frustrating if you're not a native English speaker. So,
yeah. Also, I'll note Turnpike is a physical piece of technology, right, that allows a certain form of cooperation and exchange that doesn't exist without it. So, yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. There's.
So the Turnpike, is that like a turnstile, or
it's like a turnstile? It's not a turn.
Okay.
It's like a turnstile, and that's what they used in the early days to do toll roads. That's how you did a toll road, right? And it wasn't toll roads. Didn't at first. It wasn't necessarily a monetary exchange, right? It was a way to figure out, like, oh, this is my cousin. He's allowed here with his cows or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, this is a stranger. Like you went past a marker that forced an action out of you, so you're trespassing and you know it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what the Turnpike is for. right? And it's later it gets turned into this, oh, we can exchange, right? We can use it as a marker of exchange. You want to take an action, which is to go over my private land. We'll exchange here, and then you'll be able to do that, right?
Okay.
Well, it's really important. And just as an aside, because I have to say it, and the settings in Massachusetts, the oldest corporation in the colonies, it's not even the New World yet, is the Massachusetts Turnpike. All right, and it was the oldest corporation. It was private for a very, very long time, up until like 10 years ago or something. It wasn't that long ago, and it predates the formation of the so-called United States of America. And that's, I have a book about this. That's the part why I know it's about the roads and the development of roads, which are the thing that defies the will of the king effectively, because it enables trade. But that's the thing. The turnpike enables trade, because people see it as, there's a toll on this road, I can't use it. It's like, no. It enables you to trade with the person who otherwise, like, are they bandits? Like, why do I let random people on my private property? There's no reason to do that. Right. And so it's like, right. It's like, oh, but if there's an exchange involved, right, then that's fine. Right. It's like, oh, okay. Then they're not bandits. Bandits aren't going to pay money to go on private property. They're going to go bandit somewhere else where it's easier. They don't have a turnpike in the way. They don't have to jump a fence. There's no turnpike. We'll go bandit the paths through the woods. Why not?
Yeah. Okay. That's a really, boy, I kind of want to look up an old school turnpike now and see what those actually looked like.
Yeah, my book, I don't think I have it here. I think it's in the shed. My book had a picture of it, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I mean, they basically look like wooden turnstiles, effectively. My book had like drawings, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I suppose we wouldn't have any photographs, would we?
No, there wouldn't be photographs of those. They're a little on the old side. 1600s, 1500s, things like that. Maybe older. I didn't look. This book was just dealing with roads in New England. It wasn't, roads in the New World. It wasn't dealing with like the history of turnpike. It just had to mention all that, right? And the rest is derivable from how the world operates.
Is it something like that?
Yeah, it can be. There's different styles.
Okay.
There's different styles. Usually they turn and spin. They don't usually lift up. Like, that's a gate, technically.
Okay.
Right.
Well, DuckDuckGo is failing on getting me really good images, so we'll just have to deal with what we have.
That's okay. But it's good to understand all that. Like, you can see it as a barrier, or you can see it as a way to do a cooperation that otherwise couldn't happen safely or at all. Right? Because, I mean, if I find some random person wandering on my land, what do I do? Like, right? But if my land has fencing around it and a turnstile, they're probably, not a bad person, right? They're probably going to pay the toll or have already exchanged, or they're my cousin, right? They know they're okay here, right? And it's not perfect. Like, sure, whatever, nothing's perfect. Who cares, right? But like, it's a big piece of technology. Like, it may seem like, it's a stupid little spinny thing, but whatever. No, it's a big piece of technology because of what it enables.
Before we were talking about the turnpiker, so we've got this this anecdote about Queequeg not knowing how a wheelbarrow works, and so just picking up all of his stuff in the wheelbarrow and just carrying it, and then he contrasts that with the merchant ship at his home island, and there was this great wedding feast, and they were going to pass around some kind of a drink. And the captain, when it got to him, he used it to wash his fingers, right? So it's just a contrast between two different centers of the world. One center of the world, they know how to use wheelbarrows, and the other center of the world, they know that you drink out of this dish rather than using it to wash your fingers. And if you get taken out of that center, then you're in a different place. You don't know how to act.
Right. But there's a more straightforward fundamental message here as well, right? Which is the right? They have a wheelbarrow. They, right? He talks about, he mentions, did anybody laugh when you first got your first wheelbarrow and did something really silly with it? He doesn't answer directly. He answers with a story, right? And so this is a story of civilization, which is enabled by politeness, right? So you see the way pagans have politeness, just a different kind, right? And Christendom has politeness, just a different kind. But the end result is the same. No one laughs at a mistake where they realize, how would they know, right? Right. So there's a communications gap. People recognize the communications gap, and they're polite enough not to point out the error as a result of the gap.
Okay, so did I misread this then? Because I thought it's like he doesn't quite answer the question, right? Because he answers with another question. Didn't our people laugh? And it's like, I don't know. I can kind of see it going both ways. Like they might have laughed. He doesn't answer the question, though.
He doesn't answer the question. Right.
I thought it was kind of interesting.
I don't think they did.
Yeah, I could see it going both ways. Right.
I thought it was kind of interesting that between the anecdote of Queequeg using the wheelbarrow wrong and then the merchant not interacting with the coconut juice correctly, this is kind of like both of them had it exactly backwards because of kind of where they came from. So Queequeg, coming from the outside, is using the wheelbarrow backwards. Like he has a backwards understanding of technology. And then the merchant, coming from the inside to the outside, doesn't understand renewal or refreshment. And so instead of taking it into himself, he integrates the outside of himself with the thing that he's supposed to be putting inside himself.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, this is why I'm doing a book club, because you guys notice these things and I don't.
Self-similar practicality. Well, we're looking at vertical causality, probably because, language of creation exists, and it's a good book club. And yeah, I mean, we have the vertical causality frame now to analyze these things with. It's been very helpful.
Oh man, I'm supposed to be the expert in vertical causality here, not you guys.
See, I spend a lot of time around priests who are also, good. And so I have kind of, in a sense, like a life book club of, like five or so priests that I might hear somebody say something.
Okay.
So
okay. Very good. All right. So Ishmael and Queequeg get out on the ocean, and they both are just enjoying it. And now New Bedford to Nantucket, not that far of a boat trip. It doesn't seem like it.
A day.
Yeah, a day trip.
Probably
even
on a boat like that, it's 8 hours or something on a boat. On a boat like that. Yeah, because you can get to well, you're going to go all the way out and around. It's just a pain in the keister through some reasonably dangerous waters. Like, they are the most sailed waters in the world, by the way. But I mean, I think they even beat out the Mediterranean. But actually, there's quite a bit of dangerous spots in that area coming out.
Is it rocks or is it like
it's all rocks?
Currents. Okay.
The
rocks are mapped, but you have to follow the map.
The rocks are mapped. You have to. I mean, it's also currents, because what happens is you've got a big island, Martha's Vineyard, and you got to go past that, but you got to go down and out, and so there's a strait at Woods Hole, right? And I've been sailing in this area, right? So like I can tell you, right? Or you can go down and around, right? So you can go through the strait, or you go down and around. It probably depends on the current and the wind. It's probably how you're going to decide that. And when that whole area is very dangerous. If you go all the way down past the Elizabeth Islands, you're in the I think one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, right? Which is right off the coast. And then you're into deep water and currents, and that's relatively close. You could go that way. I don't know enough about I'd have to plot a bunch of charts and to figure it all out, right? But But yeah, that's a huge shipping lane down there. But it probably didn't go through the huge shipping lane. They probably went between Woods Hole and Martha's Vineyard to get to Nantucket on that side from New Bedford. It's not ideal. They're pretty far away, actually. You're better traveling overland to to Hyannis or something on the Cape. There's a Hyannis ferry to Nantucket that's rather famous. But back then there was probably no one there.
Interesting. And while they're on the boat, there's some what is it calls it, a country bumpkin that starts making fun of Queequeg, and he like just kind of picks him up and just kind of shakes him and then throws him back down. And so it doesn't really hurt him, but it's enough to really scare him. The captain comes out, accosts Queequeg of it. But right at that moment, that same kid gets, and there's a bunch of sailing terminology here I didn't quite find, but it looks like he just got knocked off the deck by one of the masts, one of the sails, one of the pillars holding on to the sails.
The boom.
The boom.
You got the mast, and then you get the boom, and the boom swings around to hold the sail in a triangle, roughly. Usually, doesn't have to be a triangle, but booms hold sails in triangles typically.
And so the captain wasn't really paying attention to what he needed to be paying attention to, and was instead accosting Queequeg for basically just trolling a guy, because Queequeg could just pick the guy up. He wasn't in any real danger. And Queequeg is the one who crawls underneath the path of the boom, manages to lash it to something so that it doesn't run around anymore, then dives into the ocean and picks the guy out of it, and basically saves his life, which is, I don't know, that's pretty.
Can I step in here, Father, please?
Did I miss the story entirely, or
no? You missed all the interesting things about sailing and the importance of how it goes into the story, though. Can I bring my sailing knowledge to this, please?
I'm from North Dakota, right? Our boats don't get any longer than about 20 feet.
I do, which is why I was like, well, he should just kind of hand it over to me and ask me a bunch of questions about sailing, or let me set the scene here. But instead, he went off on his own. So basically what happens is, if you're not paying attention to the wind on a boat and the wind changes, and there's a bunch of ways to do it, right? There's technological ways. In the old days, they didn't use most of those. They used some of them. Generally, if you're not a crappy sailor, you know. That's not that hard, right? You know what the wind's doing. And so when you don't pay attention and the sail isn't tightened in the right spots, we'll say, right? Because I don't want to make it too technical. I could use all the technical terms, but that's not helpful. When you don't have the sail tightened to the right degree in the right direction at the right angle, right, for the wind, and when you don't change either the direction of the boat, because you can steer the boat, or move the tightening of the sail, what happens is the wind kind of takes over. And so once the wind takes over, depending upon where how tight the sail was and where it was tightened, because that matters a lot, the boom will start to swing. And the boom can swing all the way over, and it can sweep people off the deck pretty easily. And the reason why they call it a boom is because if it hits you, you'll understand why it's called a boom. You go boom. And so what happens is he's not paying attention to the wind or the direction of the boat, right? Which you need both, right? And no one, this is the interesting, no one else is on the boat, right? Because often the captain doesn't have to do all the work, right? The captain can just point the boat, and good sailors who know what they're doing will know what to do with the sail. And so there's a lot going on here, because what happens is Queequeg figures out, the boat's out of control, does all these very dramatic movements, and I haven't had to manage a boat that large by any means, but like it sounds pretty acrobatic to me. like I know what he's doing, right? Like leaping under the under the boom, grabbing a rope, tying one end of the rope in one place, the other end of the rope in the other place, which is often what you have to do to get the a crazy boom under control. And so he stops the immediate threat, right, and gets the boat righted again, basically, because once the boom's going like this, the boat can go anywhere. Right? The boat is the rudder. It doesn't mean anything. You gotta, right. The whole point of sailing is to have harmony between the steering and the wind. That's the whole trick. Now that there's a lot of pieces to that. It's not easy, right? I mean, once you learn it, it's kind of like whatever. It's super easy. But before you learn it, it's definitely not. And the only way to learn it is to get out on the water. Like there's no other no. I've taken sailing courses. There are no sailing courses that involve books. Like that doesn't happen. Not that books can't be used or aren't useful, but like it doesn't teach you anything. you learn nothing unless you're out there.
Which is why I wasn't very interesting when I was talking about it.
Yes, right. It's hard to talk about, but yeah, the fact that he's able to do this, he recognizes better than the captain does. He gets all this work done that would normally be done by at least 3 people. Right? That's kind of, he's single-handedly doing 3 people's worth of work, right? And in a clever way, at least according to the narrator, is super important, right? Because this is not your average sailor.
Right.
Everybody else on the boat is, or less than that, because they let this happen. Like a distracted captain is not, this isn't going to happen with a distracted captain alone. You have to have a crew that is not up to par. Normally on a boat, your crew will slack for your captain when your captain is distracted. And I was on a sailing trip once in Maine, and my uncle who owned the boat, he was the sailor. He'd been in the Navy. He wasn't paying attention, but it was his boat. My father's also a boat captain. I was a kid, basically. I was a child. And then I think it was my father, but it might have been one of my other uncles said, hey, what happened to the wind? And then we were all in the water. And I do mean and then we were all in the water. This is one continuous action. Like the boat flipped so fast that nobody had any time to react. Right. And so that happens. Also, somebody noticed who wasn't the captain. It just, the question was stupid. You needed to do something immediately. And that didn't happen. The sail was too constrained, and the wind shifted, I think, more than 45 degrees, and now you're in trouble because if you're aimed this way and the wind comes not from here but from here, it
just catches your sail and flips you.
The boat goes right over. Yeah, and interestingly, I did not get fully into the water with that. Because my uncle lost his glasses. But then they had to flip the boat back over, and then I had to get off and get fully wet, and I was pissed. So I was like, what the hell? But yeah, asking the question was too much. Like somebody did notice. The captain didn't know. Somebody noticed. But they didn't. You shut up. Just untie the sail. Like, what are you doing?
So despite coming from an island on which nobody sails, I mean, they have little canoes, but canoes you don't sail in.
Right.
Queequeg has gone out and mastered the art of sailing even better than all of his teachers.
Yes.
And he jumped in and pulled that guy out.
I think it's also kind of a contrast with the wheelbarrow, too. Like now he's kind of mastered the technology as well.
Right. He's the master of the technology. Yeah. Yeah, and then and he jumps in and saves the worthless guy, basically, who is kind of worth, and he did nothing but complain, right? So he proves his good nature and his good manner, and his exemplification of a good person all at once.
It's sort of a dog-headed thing too. Like I read that part and immediately thought Saint Christopher, because I was like, okay, here's like the kind of transferring through the water going on. You have the foreigner, and he's literally has sharpened teeth. I think in the previous chapter they mentioned that his teeth are filed. And so it's like you have this guy with sharp teeth that jumps in there. He's the foreigner. And then he comes back. And I saw this kind of parallel going on a little bit, which probably was intentional. I mean, it seems like so much in this book is like just so intentional. But I was thinking about the priest as he was coming into the church way back. You see that he's kind of like he's disrobing, and he has kind of like, you guys mentioned that his outer skin had a skin, like it had, there was the snow and then there was the jacket that was soaked through, and he's kind of like disrobing as he gets into the boat. And then there's this kind of thing that I'm noticing with this kind of like character that is very much kind of like, as Jonathan Pajot talks about, like the garment of skin thing. And then he comes back and he has an additional layer of skin, like the brine that they have to get off of him as well. So I'm just kind of seeing like this sort of, getting additional skin as he's getting out of the boat, and then kind of the priest losing skin as he's getting inside, kind of like the boat pulpit sort of thing. I just kind of saw a little parallel there.
Yeah, and also the guy didn't just fall off the boat. He was under the water.
Yeah.
And no one can see him except Queequeg, who knows where he is somehow, which would look like, let me tell you, like if you're on a boat and you can track everything that needs to happen with all the sails and know where the guy was that fell off, like I got nothing. I can't do that. That's for sure.
Hail to the chief.
That's a lot of tracking.
Hail to the chief.
Well, and that does happen, right? So the captain apologizes to him, right? And that to me is really interesting, and he begged his pardon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's, I should say, like after seeing all that, you should have your mind changed, and Captain can't be all bad if he could at least have his mind changed.
Right. And it is that competence, that flipping competence, the pagan, to Pseudo-Boethius's point here, right? The pagan masters the technology, right? And then everybody recognizes that, right? And affords him something they were not willing to afford him before. Right? Before they were like, yeah, we got to do something about this guy, And then our wayward narrator is like cleaving to him like a barnacle, right? And I don't obviously understand this last section, right? Yea, till poor Queequeg took his last long dive. Sounds like foreshadowing to me, but I hope it's not true.
Yeah. And then, at the very end of this chapter, Ishmael's just marveling at Queequeg and about how he unconsciously treats the rest of the world, who very often doesn't treat him well, with the highest regard. And I love this. It's a mutual joint stock world in all meridians. We cannibals must help these Christians. And it's like, that is, here's that contrasting again, right? Because I guarantee you that's not what Queequeg was thinking. He was not thinking in terms of joint stock companies, right?
Right.
That was Ishmael's projection and understanding of Queequeg's self-understanding, which is a very dangerous thing to try and do. Because as you know, like a joint stock company, I think we just call those corporations now, publicly traded corporations. It's like the people who own shares in a corporation don't really love each other. I mean, maybe they do, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but
nope, they don't.
So that's the image he uses when looking at somebody who actually seems to just have like a real love for even this guy, right? He's actually practicing Christianity too, by doing so. I'm not saying that Christianity is the only religion that can possibly do this, but love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you is commonly attributed to Jesus of Nazareth and not anybody else. So it's like Queequeg's actually a better Christian right now than anybody else on the boat, despite his paganism.
I'm noticing more of this of the technology thing now too. That it's almost like Queequeg himself is almost the technology, in a sense. Like he's kind of, not only has he kind of mastered the stuff that he wasn't able to do, but I guess also in kind of like the Pajot thing with the garments of skin, that is the first technology, and that he's kind of like he has them covered in a sense. Like he had all the needs of the boat are covered by him. And then, and the fact that he always has his technology with him, like he has the pipe tomahawk, but then also there's a part earlier in the chapter before they get on the boat where Queequeg is always kind of fidgeting with his harpoon, like the sheath that's on it, because the barbs keep getting like unstuck or something, and they make a little comment about him kind of having a particular affection for having his own rather than having it issued to him by somebody else, but it's kind of like this familiarity with tools and this kind of I don't know, that it seems like he's, even though he's from the outside and that he's this kind of like primitive in a sense, the way that Ishmael describes him early on, that he seems to be kind of the most like attached to technology person of all of them, or at least attentive to it.
It seems that he probably has the best relationship to it, right? That he's mastered it, but he could, I don't know, maybe we'll see this later, that he could probably just live without it as well. Like you drop me on his island, I'm gonna be like, right? But you drop him in New Bedford, he can figure it out. He's gonna look a little funny, but he can figure it out. And he could also go home to his island and he can figure it out there too, because he's mastered it. He's mastered it all.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, he does seem to be a cut above, and he is being put deliberately in this weird frame, right? In this weird sort of superior Christian frame or Christendom frame or something, where he clearly doesn't belong, because his trick is not technology, right? His trick is attention. He knows what to pay attention to, all right, and therefore what to care for and what not to pay attention to or not care for. Right? He doesn't care about the polite conventions of how to escalate a battle with somebody making fun of you. He just does it the right way. I'm going to just take care of this and show this guy that I'm not to be trifled with. Right? So he doesn't really care about that convention because that convention is dumb. But on the other hand, he's going to church. So he knows which to pay attention to and which things not to, when to conform and when to perform. Right, which I think is really important.
Yeah, very good. And finally, we make it to the fabled land of Nantucket. You've been there before, Mark?
I have not been to Nantucket yet. No.
We should go next summer, just for the heck of it.
Absolutely, sir. We will do that. We'll put it on the list. I was gonna say I might go. I should probably head down to New Bedford in a couple of weeks. I'm not going to be at the book club, by the way, because I got to go to New England. Yeah, I should jet down to New Bedford because I always wanted to go to the stupid whaling museum there, and I've never gotten around to it.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Now I got
want to
go
reason. Now.
Yeah. Well, New Bedford's interesting too. I mean, it won't look like what he describes in the book because they got this big thing across the bay with doors to protect it from the storms, and obviously they didn't have that back then.
No, I suppose not.
But it is. He describes it as out in the ocean, and that's the thing. Like Martha's Vineyard, look, you can see Martha's Vineyard from shore. It's a huge island. It's I think it's 3 times the size of Nantucket, and it's right across a sound. And like when I was away in New England, at the first week of June, the place I was staying, the reason why I stay there is because I have a direct view of Martha's Vineyard. Right, you can't see Nantucket from there. I don't think you can see Nantucket from land with binoculars. I think it's
the curvature of the earth.
You can see it from Martha's Vineyard, I think, if I remember correctly, because I have been to Martha's Vineyard a few times. I think you can see it from there if you're in the southeastern corner of the island, or probably anywhere on the eastern side of the vineyard. I bet you could see Nantucket from pretty easily. Vineyard's also, I think, higher out of the water. Right.
Right, because the description that Melville gives of Nantucket, and I'm certain he had been there, was basically like a sandbar out in the ocean, like an overgrown sandbar.
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
And it's like, oh boy, we've got a house built on sand here, ladies and gentlemen. That doesn't end well, but never mind that. It's a biblical allusion, Mark. I know you haven't read that book.
I haven't. I heard it's good, but it's long, and I don't even like book clubs. So, yeah, I think it's important to understand too, like the Cape Cod area, Cape and the Islands is called, right? The Cape Cod area used to be hardwood forest, right? And all of that got pretty much chopped down. There's some hardwood they're trying to rehabilitate somewhere on the Cape, but when you do that, what you get are sand dunes and crabgrass. And so a lot of the islands are sand dunes and crabgrass.
Because they talked about how a single piece of wood was venerated like the true cross in Rome.
Yeah.
It makes sense. If everything that's not fish, you have to get in from someplace else.
That's after the first cutting down. So a lot of people don't, the climate people make a big deal about, trees. All of the Northeast has been deforested twice. So we're talking about 200- and 300-year-old wood has been cut down and regrown and cut down. That happened. And just to let you know, like all of Maine, all of New Hampshire, all of Vermont, all of Massachusetts, most of Connecticut and Rhode Island. There's a lot of coast on Connecticut in particular. So, and Rhode Island. So yeah, you get, let's calm down a bit. Okay. Like trees grow back. It'll be fine. Right. But yeah, this is right after all that's happened. So yeah, wood is not, I don't know what New England would have looked like. I can't even imagine it. Right. Because when I grew up, we got 50-year-old trees everywhere. This is not a big deal, but back then they probably didn't have a lot of 50-year-old trees, and everything was probably patchy, because now we can cut them down all pretty quickly. But back when you had just hand axes and stuff, deforesting a region that big takes a little bit of time, my friends. Quite a little bit. Probably 50 years, maybe more.
Yeah. So yeah, we're in Nantucket, and everything here is related to the ocean. And they talk about how the Nantucketeers are the ones who rule the oceans. They don't give that title to the British in this book. Right. They give it to Nantucket there.
That's technically true. We stole all the shipwrights from England because we had all the wood, and they had already. The UK's also been deforested like 19 billion times. So, like, simmer down. But the part of the reason why we won the Revolutionary War is because we had all their shipwrights, and I suspect that we had all the talent from the UK in the US, which is where the whaling comes from. The technology for whaling comes from entirely, because not only do we have the shipwrights, and that helps us win the war, and eventually we have the world's navy, right? That's a straight line, guys. There's no hiding the ball on that. What ends up happening is all the smart people are here, and they invent it. They basically refine the whaling technology. So I think that's very much a technology story.
Yeah.
RJ has a comment here about, is there something to be said about how Nantucket rises from the waters, a place in between land and the exile of the ocean? And I think it is that. It's like, it's this floating stability that's out there. And he writes here this little thing that, let me see here, that, let me see if I can find it, that let America add Mexico to Texas and pile Cuba upon Canada. that the English overswarm all India and hang out their blazing banner from the sun, but 2/3 of this globe are the Nantucketers. Like, just no matter what, like they're kind of their reach, and the fact that they're so accustomed to that, to being right there, just completely surrounded by water with no hills or anything like that, just sand. It's like they might as well, even when they're settled, they're still out on the water.
Well, it's a good point, right? Like he says, like, oh, it's sand and weeds and imported thistle from Australia that holds the island together, in fact, which is true, by the way.
But they actually imported thistle from Australia?
I don't know that they imported thistle from Australia, but like the entire Cape is non-native plant species.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they deforested it and they couldn't get it back because it's a spit of land that sticks quite, like Cape Cod's pretty cool. Like it sticks way out in the water, right? Like way out, like way out. It's quite a drive. It's the only thing that makes Massachusetts a long drive is if you go from the tip of the Cape to Western Mass. But you go from the edge of society in New Bedford, where the mixing, there's a mixing there, right? And he goes to the edge of the edge, right? And then he gets a boat and he goes to the edge of the edge again, right? Which is just barely above the water and held together with all the foreign powers, and yet rules the seas, right? So he's making that contrast between, we may be the outcasts, we may be on the edge, but actually we're kind of in charge, that we're the kings of the seas, sort of a thing here on Nantucket.
It calls back to that, I think it was like the very first or second chapter where he would have nothing but a Nantucket crew with a Nantucket boat and a Nantucket captain.
Right.
Because if what he says is even partially true, then they're going to be the ones who can keep your little floating factory functioning the best.
Exactly.
Your little...
They're the kings of the sea. You want the best.
Yeah, the best of the best. And so...
and it's probably the largest sailing port in the world at this point, Nantucket. It held the largest or busiest harbor, some weird metric, right? Because of the whaling. So they held it for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. And then LA took that over, or is it someplace else?
No, not back then. No. It's the late 1800s when they dredge New York Harbor. New York takes it over. Before that, it's all Massachusetts all day long. It's either Rockport or Newburyport or Salem or Nantucket or New Bedford. Like, I think it just floats between those. New Bedford's a fantastic harbor. Newburyport's a fantastic, because it's a river comes down. It's fantastic. Like, some of these harbors are just beautiful. It's amazing how many amazing harbors there are in Massachusetts. It's like, right. It's not right. It's better in some sense than the deep water harbors on the Chesapeake Bay, which are gorgeous, by the way. But they don't, again, the Chesapeake Bay never catches on in that way until much later, right? It's New York City it's Cornelius Vanderbilt that builds New York City as a shipping hub, right? So before that, all the shipping hubs are in the Massachusetts region.
Okay. Well, it's a pretty short chapter, and I want to talk about chowder because we're getting close to supper time here.
Yes, me too.
What did I write? Oh, yeah, there's just even more foreshadowing here. He's in Nantucket. They're able to find Peter Coffin's cousin's in the tripods, and coffin for my innkeeper upon landing in my first whaling port, tombstone staring at me in the whaleman's chapel, and here a gallows and a pair of prodigious black pots too. Are these last throwing out oblique hints touching Tophet? Tophet's a name for hell, apparently. So here we are. Yeah, but he just keeps on ignoring these signs and insists on going out to sea. So what can you do?
Yeah, he notices them but ignores them. Right, that's the important part. Yeah, some people don't notice them. Whatever. That's not this problem.
And then they they have both Queequeg and Ishmael have their own miscommunications with Mrs. Hussey at the inn, and don't realize that she's asking if they want clam or cod chowder. So it's like again with the whole misunderstanding when you're not in your home. Um,
Yeah, they're just saying clam and cod.
there's more of that
He doesn't-
ridiculous dialogue.
Yeah, he doesn't
Yeah.
seem to know what cod is somehow, which would be weird, but whatever. And he just thinks the clam, like you're going to give me a cold clam. Yeah, there's the mistranslation there.
It seems like Mrs. Hussey also has a much thicker accent than the people from the previous location that he was at. So there is kind of that, like, you know, the integrity of speech is kind of breaking down. And then, like, I don't want to skip too. It's kind of a short chapter. I don't want to skip too far, but there's this kind of thing where, I guess, to add on to the just how far on the edge of the edge of the edge this place is, that she literally has a fish vertebra necklace, and like the bookkeeping is done in shark skin bound books, and even the roads are paved with clamshells. And this is kind of like they're out there, but then everything is kind of like encroaching, but then in a like technological sort of sense that, you know, it kind of draws to mind images of like that one Pirates of the Caribbean movie where everybody's like, you know, just kind of overgrown on the ship and everything, and they all have kind of like animal parts and stuff. Where it's like, you know, they're out there and they're more advanced than everyone else, but also they're more kind of like the animal part is very much kind of taking over and overgrowing.
Even the milk kind of tastes like fish because they're being fed fish, which.
Yeah. And then
when my
the
parents
cows
lived in
graze
England,
on sand.
right? Yeah. When my parents lived in England, it was right before the mad cow disease and during the mad cow disease outbreak. And they didn't like eating English beef because it tasted like fish. Or the chicken, was it the beef didn't taste right. They greatly preferred getting the imported American beef. And then right after that, the whole mad cow disease thing became a thing. And now my parents can't donate blood by act of Congress.
Nice.
Because they lived in England during the wrong times, even though they were, yeah. So anyway, just in case you think that was a bit of embellishment, what you feed cows really does matter for their flavor. But yeah, these are the fish people.
For good chowder,
These are the fish people. They
are,
because it's all they seem to cook.
It's the edge of the edge. Well, and they have it in abundance. And yeah, I mean, selling. Well, first of all, you guys are pronouncing it wrong. It's chowder, being from New England. Chowder. But yeah, I mean, they have it in abundance over there, right? And that's a big meal, actually. It's quite good. Actually, get a good chowder, let me tell you, especially in the winter. Oh, it'll warm you right up.
I have a salmon.
It sounds like it's all.
Recipe. It's good stuff. I was looking at this and actually taking notes so I could do a clam chowder recipe, because they said that they put pork in there, and I never thought to do that. But oh my goodness, am I going to try that? Because I have a really nice salmon chowder that I picked up from this place called King's Chowder House, and they put like asparagus in it and everything. It's amazing. But I think I'm going to experiment. After I saw that they said, you know, really tiny pieces of pork, I'm going to give that a shot and see how that goes.
Give it a little bit of fat and a little bit of saltiness, which
right
you would think they would have from the butter, but apparently they just need even more. So
yeah, no, it's a good hearty meal, but it's also a leftovers meal, right? It's not rich people's food. It can be quite good when done correctly, but as with all seafaring foods on the coast, this is not the best of the best that are eating these kinds of foods.
Well, assuming that this is an inn they can afford to stay in, it sounds about right.
Probably all of them. Like if you go to the Cape, like there's shell driveways everywhere. It's like because they use what they have, right? And so yeah, it's very
Not
much
going to
that,
run out of
especially on the island.
seashells.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've got them. They use them. It makes sense. They've got them in abundance, right? So they use them in abundance. It's not magic.
Yeah.
But it does do, as Castle pointed out, it's more of this edge stuff. Like we've gone from partially civilized body, but there's a church, into the gallows and the gates of Tophet. Oh, okay, sounds good, right? And this.
But
meal,
at the
which
end
is
of this
delicious.
chapter,
Good.
at the end of this chapter, we get one of the last signs of civilization I think we're going to see for a while, where Mrs. Hussey takes away Queequeg's harpoon, just says, I don't let anybody have any weapons up in their rooms. You'll get it back in the morning. Queequeg, he's like, just not going to deal with this woman, which is probably the right move. She could just throw you out. Just enforcing that one last little bit of civilization and order here before we get to the ship tomorrow.
Yes, I do want to point out one thing
and by tomorrow I mean next week.
Next week, yeah. But I want to mention one quick thing that I missed in this chapter, which is because she misunderstands them to want clam chowder. They get the clam chowder and I absolutely love it. He wants to try the cod. So he impersonates her and gets cod chowder. Right? So you see that rebellion and that, like, we're going to go outside the rules. And he wasn't quite sure it was going to work, but it did. I'm going to try this out, see what happens. And then he impersonates her, gets some cod chowder, which, he shouldn't have, right? And gets away with it. So that's another, right? And then at the end of the chapter, order's established, right? And even the pagan dare not, right? And then there's a story behind it, right? Like, oh, this guy was killed in the middle of the night. And so now we just don't allow weapons upstairs, right?
Yeah. But they used to, until something happens.
Exactly.
Which means it's a good rule.
Yes.
Didn't just come out of nowhere, came from somewhere.
Yeah. That's how rules happen.
Don't stop the chainsaw with your hands. Who needed to get that warning label put on there?
I don't know. The warning label wouldn't have done me any good. I was deep into 6 different mistakes by the time that happened. 6 errors at least. It's almost healed.
All righty. Well, we've got at least chapter 16 next week, and maybe we'll be able to squeeze in chapter 17. I'll do a word count. But once again, Castle and Mark, thanks for joining me on this voyage. And we'll call it there because it's dinner time. So take care and God bless you all.